Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club. My name is Jim Pollard. I'm on the program committee. I'm a former board member. Thank you for coming for this. I've read this book in the last week. I thought I'd better bloody do that just in case there are things that in Les's remarkable life that I need to be across. I'm a journalist from Australia as well. I'm from Sydney. I worked 20 years on Murdoch papers, and I've had about 20 years up here, mainly with The Nation. I wasn't in the TV sector, but I think in TV in Australia, I find it hard to believe that anyone in that industry would not know of Les, because he has done so much. He's had an extraordinary life. This book tells it right from the very start, the boy from Leichhardt, and how he got lucky once or twice, and it opened the door to an incredible life. Les has been a witness of an incredible amount of history, as you will see. He's met all sorts of remarkable people, and yet, in a way, he's also been behind the scenes, because whatever work he did, you never saw him. Okay, you saw wonderful footage that he got from, war zones with famous people, working with great journalists, but he was the man behind the camera. So I think this is I'm glad to see this come to this club. This club, one of the great founding members was a guy, you can see photographs of him on the back bookcase, Neil Davis. Neil Davis was a fantastic, famous war cameraman. Les is not so much wars, but he's covered the entire spectrum, and the depth of what he's seen in terms of countries and events is extraordinary. Anyway, we're going to give you a taste of some of that. We've got video clips to show, and we're going to talk a little bit about what some of these photos all are, and then there'll be an opportunity for people, if you want to ask about various things. There'll be a microphone up there where you can ask questions as well. But you want to say anything to start? How would you?
Not much. I think I'll go and have a meal and a beer. No, what I'd like to say is I think the best way to show my work is in the films that I brought along tonight. I've cut them down, they're mostly 1 hour longs, but I've cut them down to a reasonable size so you don't get that bored with them. The first one I'm going to show is on Eritrea from 1980, where we went along to do a 1 hour special on the war, the fighting between Ethiopia and the Eritreans. So basically what we did was to go to Addis Ababa, where Mengistu, the Marxist government of Mengistu, was having its May celebrations. He was a Marxist leader. And so we filmed all that, and then we decided to try and get through to Eritrea and meet up with the EPLF, the Eritreans People Liberation Front, and to see it from their side. So we would have it on both sides, the Ethiopians who were attacking the poor Eritreans, and to see how they were dealing with it. So the only time we could go was to travel at night. So we left Addis Ababa very early in the morning to try and get to the border near nightfall, because the Ethiopians were bombing most of Eritrea, but they could only do it during the daytime, the daylight hours. So we got up to the Amirda River, which was the border between Eritrea and Ethiopia, and it was in full flood. So there was no way our vehicles were going to get across and get into Eritrea. So we had to strip off, carry the equipment, and go ahead in our underwear, try and cross the river. But the real problem was there were a couple of crocodiles that we'd seen on the banks, and and huge logs floating down this very fast moving river. Anyway, eventually we got across and we made it into Eritrea, and we met up with the Liberation Army there and lived in caves with them. And it was quite interesting because the caves were full of mice. So I suppose they were getting away from the bombing that was happening during the day. It wasn't very pleasant because as soon as you were eating anything, the mice would be, on your shoulders and running everywhere. Anyway, so on one occasion, we knew that we couldn't go out during the day, only at night. One of the soldiers came running up into the cave saying, "They're coming, they're coming, they're coming." And this is what we saw.
There is a plague on this land. Today, a plague of locusts. But through history, Eritrea has suffered every imaginable hardship. It's the insects that are doing now to Eritrea what drought did in 1984 in the Great Famine. And this on a land stained with the blood of 1 million people killed in a bitter and forgotten war. Eritrea's enemy in this war is Ethiopia, the prize independence. It's a David and Goliath struggle, one of the smallest armies in Africa, backed by no one, taking on one of the largest, supported by the Soviet Union. The outcome is significant to both East and West. Eritrea's ports dominate the vital shipping routes through the Red Sea to the Suez Canal. The Soviets have a base here, a base they stand to lose should Eritrea win the war. The Soviets support, with men and money, the military junta of Lieutenant Colonel President Haile Mengistu. They've sent 4,000 military advisors to join the 11,000 Cubans fighting with what's now one of Africa's largest armies. But Mengistu is a man so erratic and despotic, even the Soviets despair of what he's doing to his country. Mengistu's greatest crime, squandering an estimated $5 billion on sophisticated weapons at a time when thousands of his countrymen were starving during the Ethiopian famine. They still go hungry, and countries like Australia are left paying the bill to feed them. The Eritreans began their fight for independence long before the famine. In fact, 27 years ago. With their land, their language and culture being swallowed up by Ethiopia, they took up arms. First as a factionalized group of rebels, now as an efficient fighting force, united under the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, or EPLF. Women fight alongside men, Christians alongside Muslims, peasants alongside merchants. Like the Viet Cong and Afghanistan's Mujahideen, they are frustrating a bigger and better equipped enemy because they're committed. The self-same women once considered fit for the most menial tasks now command tanks.
The popular impression is that this is a guerrilla war. The Eritreans, an unruly bunch of rebels prowling in the hills. That couldn't be further from the truth. This is conventional war with conventional weapons, tanks and artillery, all of it courtesy of the Russians.
The EPLF now have an arsenal of captured weapons they say is almost the equal of the Ethiopians. They include more than 50 tanks, long-range artillery, rocket launchers, and anti-aircraft guns, all of them captured from the enemy. And they're using the weapons to devastating effect. Throughout Eritrea is evidence of the mauling that the Ethiopians are receiving at the hands of the Eritrean rebels. Here, the shells of tanks, wrecked in a recent battle for the town of Alphabet, one of the last 4 towns in Eritrea held by Mengistu. 20,000 of his crack troops were routed, the Eritreans' biggest victory so far. They are kept in camps along steep mountain valleys, their boots confiscated to make escape more difficult. But most don't want to escape. What awaits them back in Ethiopia is worse than anything the Eritreans can inflict. Many have been here for years, wasted lives following endless routines. The EPLF wants to send these prisoners home, but the Ethiopian dictator refuses to take them back. Such is Mengistu's arrogant pride, he denies they are prisoners of war. He calls these people deserters. These are the people Mengistu sends to fight his war. Most are illiterate peasants, some as young as 14, forced to fight in a war they don't understand. These are the lucky ones that weren't killed, but their release is impossible until Mengistu acknowledges that they even exist. And so desperate is Mengistu for soldiers, he still sends boys like these to the front. Abu Michael is from Aras province in southern Ethiopia. He was a 14-year-old in 8th grade when 50 soldiers surrounded his school and rounded up over 100 students. 2 months' training was all he had before being sent to war.
Okay, that's the first clip. That was, I think, 1992?
Up to 92, yes.
Okay. I'd just like to give people a bit of a structure to your life.
Okay. Was it all war?
You grew up in Leichhardt, and you got you were lucky early on. You had a flash of instinct. Go to the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Commission, and you got a little bit lucky there, and even more lucky when you got over to England. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I always wanted to get into that side of the business, the photography side. And in those days, there were no colleges in Australia that were training cameramen. It was all done really on the job, and most of those jobs were taken up. Now today, there's wonderful colleges and studios that will train people, but in those days it wasn't. So I set my sights on London, where I thought I could get a bit of training and then come back to the ABC and hopefully get a job as a cameraman. So I worked day and night to get the airfare, or in my case it was a ship voyage across to London. And I was lucky enough, because when I got to England, I won a scholarship to the BBC. Yeah. Which was extremely rare for, but they had 2 or 3 Commonwealth scholarships, and I got one of those scholarships, and lucky enough ended up doing the full training, and then the ABC, who had an office in London, asked me would I come back, instead of going on back to Sydney, join them in their London office. So that's what I did, and so okay. Very fortunate. Because Leichhardt in those days was an extremely poor inner suburb of Sydney, and I had a mother who was trying to raise 6 children, so there wasn't much help coming from those quarters.
Okay, and she was doing that on her own?
She did it all on her own. Amazing okay. Woman, amazing. And I can sit back now and say that, but at the time I thought, come on, what's happening, you know, so...
You're her 5th child, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you got the boat. Do you know what year that was?
Oh, I do. 1960. 7.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So you've got swinging London in a sense.
Swinging London, yeah, all set. I'd already paid for the 6 months tuition at a school called the London School of Film Techniques, which was a bit dodgy, I think. But so I was very pleased to win the scholarship at the BBC, and I went to their training college down in Isham, I think.
Given the way that your career has unfolded, it appears that you actually got a bloody good training there. Is that true?
Amazing,
Yeah, I mean,
amazing.
What sort of things are they teaching you? They're teaching you lighting and going out and doing jobs with them?
Well, basically, it was all film in those days. There was no electronic cameras, so it was what was film, how to expose it, and putting things into focus, which, by the way, that was in focus if it looked a bit dodgy, because it's an very old film, and a lot of these stories are being transferred from film to tape, and the colours are not great, and sometimes the focus might look pretty dodgy, but originally it was spot on. So no,
yeah, he spent a few days thinking of that excuse. No, I'm joking. What sort of jobs did they? I mean, the ABC have clearly thought, okay, we've got this fellow young lad who has got good training, then they've started to send you out on jobs. What were those initial jobs?
Once I joined the ABC in London?
Yeah.
Oh, they were varied in mostly, well, I remember a lot of times, because we have a large Italian population, any earthquakes or popes dying, I'd be on a plane going straight to Italy and doing earthquakes and popes. So I went through a lot of popes in that time. So that was always interesting. And of course, anything to do with the Commonwealth, like coal coming from Australia. I remember there was one particular story. Coal was coming from Australia, and there was a strike on in Britain, and the strikes couldn't be broken because the unions in Australia wouldn't let the ships leave unless they were going to drop the coal anywhere but Britain. And of course they dropped them in Rotterdam, and then the ships would come across from Rotterdam and delivered them up north to Newcastle and so on. So I was filming the strike breakers mostly. So those sort of stories.
So you were in the ABC
London office, Portland Place.
Yes, in Portland Place. Okay, and you've got, after a while, some real quality journalists, if you can have an Australian journalist of quality.
No, you can. Amazing, some amazing journalists who are now still my friends, Ray Martin. So within that first 5 years of working in London, I was lucky enough to be able to go across to London, to New York, where Ray Martin and a few people, and I did that for 5 years. So I covered London, Europe, Middle East and Africa, plus the United States for 5 years. So I was quite busy. No frequent flyers in those days.
One of those first jobs was covering, US presidential campaigns.
Yeah, well, yes, go ahead.
Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter. Well, very funny, because I don't know if you probably don't know Ray Martin, but he's quite a big star in Australia these days. But in those days, he wasn't. But he was quite a practical joker. And he rang me up one day and said, look, we're going to follow Jimmy Carter, who looks like he could be the president of the United States, worth hooking onto him. And he had 2 planes, Peanut 1 and Peanut 2, given that he was a peanut farmer. And so we were lucky enough to get on Peanut 1, and it was decked out as a first-class salon. Jimmy Carter was up the front, but all the rest of the journalists were in first class, and you paid that first-class fare. So as soon as I got on board from LaGuardia to fly around the country with Jimmy Carter, I noticed that there were meals going around, and they were huge New York steaks and everything, lobsters, but I got this small tin of strictly kosher food. And I was sitting next to Ray, and I said, he was eating away on a New York cut steak, and I said, gee, I've lucked out here, mate. I think we could swap. And he said, no, that's yours. He said, look, everyone will get that on the trip. You've just got it first off. And I said, oh, okay, fine. So it went on, and of course we flew to Chicago, and in Chicago we did a rally there and came back, and sure enough, there it was, the strictly kosher food. And Ray was eating away at lobster, and the sound man had his nice steak, and I thought, well, there's something definitely going wrong here. So we went on to LA and a few other places, and I kept swapping seats, thinking I'm not going to end up with this strictly kosher food all the time. And eventually it went on for a week, and the whole plane knew about it except me. And every time the steward would come back the stewards apparently were saying, I'm not giving it to him, he's going to hit me. They would put the kosher food down in front of me, and I'd say, I got up and said, look, I've had enough of it. Well, the whole plane just stood up and clapped. Jimmy Carter came back and he said, it took you over a week. He said, that's pretty good stuff, a week. I did get my New York cut. Ray Martin. Ray Martin did it.
So that was a joke by Ray Martin. For those of you who don't know, Ray is, he's probably been the most popular TV host and a very, very good journalist in the last 50 years in Australia, I suppose. But built on his ability as a journalist. Anyway, but you went on and you covered a whole host of presidential campaigns.
Richard Nixon, we were in Watergate, we were in Washington the morning Watergate broke, and we covered the whole of that. And when Nixon finally came out to do, because it was election time, hence Watergate and the bugging of the phones, we're on board Air Force One, and that was a bit of a coup for us as foreigners to be on board Air Force One. And I know after takeoff, Nixon, and he hadn't come out of the White House for quite some time, came back from the 707 Air Force One in those days and said, I hear we've got some Aussies on board. And yes, and he shook our hands and he said, I always know the world's safe if there's Aussies on board. So that was the only time I met him. But I did do the tour through the United States with him on board Air Force One. So very lucky. Him and Gerald Ford, I went on board Air Force One with.
Okay.
Amazing, really, from Australia, no votes there.
Later presidents didn't get on quite so well with, was there something going on with the Clintons, is that right?
Yeah, well, I did do one, the second election he was running for, I did get on with the Clintons, but I wasn't on Air Force One, I was on the backup plane.
Right.
So I didn't really meet the Clintons.
Okay. You talked about Italy. You had several times in your career, if you read the book, it starts off with an extraordinary drama, which we're not going to surprise you with, but I'm amazed you actually survived that. Later on, there was this incident in southern Italy, Mount Etna.
Oh, Mount Etna, yes. Well, we heard that Mount Etna was about to erupt, so we flew down from London with a volcanologist who said, look, it's only days away, but I think you're quite safe to go up there. There was a lot of snow around the mountain. We climbed up, we pitched a tent, and settled down for the night, thinking that nothing much will happen. We'll see it all in daylight the next day, but unfortunately, it blew out one of the sides of the mountain. Instead of going through the top, it went out the side of it. And within half an hour, our tent was engulfed, and we were really scrambling for our lives. When that was amazing scenes, but wonderful footage of this lava. We were right there. And the amazing thing about being on a mountain like Etna,
forever a photographer.
Oh yeah, only the shots. It doesn't matter about life and that. But it's amazing because you could be this close to the lava flow and not be burnt, or the heat was there, of course, but you were able to literally get down and get the shots of the lava flowing down the mountain. So fantastic footage.
What was the journalist you were with there?
Des Power.
Okay. And do you know the year of that?
Oh, it's in the book.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, I don't.
It
would have been 75.
Okay.
76. Something
Okay.
Like that.
It was a big eruption.
Huge eruption. It engulfed many towns, unfortunately.
Many people killed? Or?
I don't think anyone was killed. I think they had enough time to get out of the way, but sort of it took over villages. And,
Okay.
we were lucky to escape with our lives.
We might go for another
Video?
clip now.
Well, this is interesting because my good friend, we're going to show it. We can, all right. My good friend Paul Lockyer, who was a member of this club and worked in Southeast Asia for a very long time, and was loved around the area, became a very good friend of mine. I was godfather to one of his children. Unfortunately, he was killed in a helicopter accident in 2011. But he had a great sense of humour as well, and we did this story as a sort of reunification cycle race from south to north, just after the war in Vietnam. So.
The old communist capital had never seen anything quite like this. There's much more than a bike race in the making here. This is a further demonstration of Hanoi coming out of its shell. Everyone from cyclists to mannequins shaking off their communist straitjackets. Vietnam is hardly a world force in cycling. There's been little time allowed for such bourgeois pursuits until now. But no one seems overawed by the daunting challenge that lies ahead.
This race will make the Tour de France look like a cakewalk. A journey over 1,800 kilometres over some of the worst roads in all of Asia. And who knows how many will make it to the finish line.
Determined to make the distance is 58-year-old Phan Quang Tan, by far the oldest competitor. Tan was part of a crack South Vietnamese army cycling team during the war. For him and many other Southerners, this is their first trip to Hanoi, the first time they'll see their country from north to south. Close to 140 competitors, teams from all over Vietnam, set off on a warm-up lap with 3 weeks of hard riding ahead of them. Most Vietnamese can't wait to get off their bikes. Cycles in all shapes and forms are still the main form of transport in Vietnam. Aside from Tan, who set his cycling records 30 years ago, this is a race of unknowns. The opening sprint over a 60-kilometre course through the streets of Hanoi spread eagles afield, leaving some searching for direction. It's obviously the event, as novel as it is, that captures the imagination of the Vietnamese people, not the result. As soon as the race passes by, the people can't wait to fill the vacuum the police battled so hard to create for the cyclists. Crowd control will be just as difficult as the pack finally heads out of Hanoi, down Highway 1. It may not be the most professional of bike races, but it must be close to the noisiest. Their long, loud journey will eventually take them across the 17th parallel, which used to mark the border between North and South, through Da Nang, Da Lat, and finally on to Ho Chi Minh City, Old Saigon. But just negotiating the north will be difficult enough. Throughout it all, Tan, the cagey veteran, hangs back, staying out of trouble from the pack, pacing himself. He's happy, he says, to take in the countryside, a tough way to play tourist. As the race moves deeper into the rice fields, the curiosity intensifies. A ribbon of colour flashing through the countryside, an incongruous vision in a world still locked firmly in the past. The jarring road begins to take its toll on the bikes, but the competitors still hold their enthusiasm. The final stage of the race to Ho Chi Minh City, 180 kilometres. Less than half those who started in Hanoi will contest the last leg. In Ho Chi Minh City, tens of thousands have flocked to the finishing point. Organisers and police are concerned that the cyclists will never make it through the crowds to end the long race. Only some uncompromising crowd control finally clears a path. In all the confusion, it was difficult to work out exactly who had won. Not that the crowd was too bothered. They were there to cheer anything that moved. For the record, it was a hometown victory. A Saigon team captured most of the honours. And once the leading group of cyclists was through, the people swamped the finishing line. Tan was nowhere to be seen. For close to an hour, other cyclists battled their way through the traffic jam to an inglorious finish. And there, finally, was Tan, keeping his pledge. All he had to do was find the finishing line. The race probably won't rate highly in his career successes, but for sheer endurance it could hardly be surpassed. And his reward? A sponsorship of $500,000 dong from a Saigon noodle restaurant, the equivalent of 60 Australian dollars.
Yeah.
Some lighter moments.
Did you had to wait for him to at the end? Did it take long or?
Well, it was finding him through that crowd, you know. I mean, I kept on saying to Paul, "Well, where is he? Where is he? I need to get to the finishing line." And we were on the finishing line, but you could hardly find it. No, look, he made it.
Yeah.
He made it, and he got 60 dong.
Yeah,
or
great.
600 dong, whatever it was.
Now, at the start,
Oh, at the
you
start,
had a real problem, didn't you?
I had a real problem because the start wasn't the start you saw there where the flag went up and they raced off. The whole idea was that the police were going to give me that Jeep, that police Jeep. They followed me everywhere and they said, "That's your Jeep. You can have that Jeep and do anything you like." And I used it a lot. But in the beginning, there was a little Vietnamese guy who was about this big, who was the local Vietnamese cameraman for the local station. So he was about this big and I'm this big. And they were going to strap us into the back of the Jeep, and when the start line hit, the Jeep was going to pull out in front and we were going to have the bikes all coming towards us. So we were all set, and one thing that hadn't worked out was that he was a lot shorter and I'm a lot taller, and there was a large branch of a tree hanging over which hit me on the back of the head as soon as the Jeep took off, and they just don't drive off, they took off. So it knocked me unconscious and I was quite out of it. So the whole race had to stop till they woke up this foreigner, Farang, and sort of got me back, and then I went and started again, but I wasn't going to get back in that Jeep. So I said, I'll do it from the eventually
side.
I got back.
Okay. That journalist.
Nothing is easy when you're filming those sort of things. Yeah, anyway, that journalist, yeah.
Paul Lockyer. In his career, he got known for rural reporting
Yes.
in Australia.
Yes.
But you did other jobs with him.
Lots.
At this stage, you were with, after your, was it 20 years in the UK?
Yeah.
You went back to Australia?
Yes, I went back to Australia to work with Paul on the midday show.
Right.
And so I became the producer on the midday show, as well as shoot some stories, but basically I was Paul's producer, so I was the boss, which Paul never liked too much. And so we used to have banters about all that. And I remember on one occasion when I was trying to get, I think I was in Singapore or somewhere, Manila perhaps, I was trying to get the excess baggage, which is a lot of baggage, down in price, and Paul kept on saying, because we'd had a hard trip, look, let's just pay the bloody stuff and get on the plane or get to the lounge. And I said, no, I'm the producer. I will decide what the budget is. Anyway, so as we walked off, Paul turned back and looked at me and he said, I'm sorry, mate, but you're not a producer's F-hole. A-hole, rather. A-hole. Yeah. So that's the sort of relationship Paul and I had together. So he was right. I was not a producer's.
But it sounds like one of the other stories that he was happy to have a good time on camera, and that you haven't got a clip of it here, but can you tell us about the singing Filipinos?
Oh, that's an amazing story. So we went to the Philippines, and as I said, I was the producer, so I said to Paul as I was walking off the aircraft in Manila, what's the story? And he said, well, the story is, Les, every Filipino can sing. Every Filipino can sing. He said, yep, every Filipino can sing. He said, we're going to do a story about Filipinos singing. I said, all right, okay. And we did a couple other stories. But so we did decide, well, he decided that we would get Unchained Melody, and we'd get every aspect of life, a policeman, a chef in a restaurant, Cardinal Sin, to sing a portion of Unchained Melody. So you could imagine, and I remember on one occasion I said, all right, we had a guy holding the donkey in those street things, those horse and carts that go through Manila. If you've been to Manila, you would have seen plenty of those the tourists get in. So he would have a song, and he'd have his donkey there singing, "Oh my love, my darling," and so we had the policeman do it. So with the policeman, he said, this guy was directing traffic in the middle of Manila. He said, I bet he's got a good voice. And I said, Paul, we can't go up into a policeman in the middle of Manila. And he said, yeah, we can. Yeah, he'll do it. And I sort of walked out in the middle of the Manila traffic, trying to get around the traffic. And I got up to him on his little pedestal. And I said, tugged at his trousers. I said, could you sing a little bit of Unchained Melody? And I thought that was it. I thought the handcuffs will go on. I'll just be taken off to some loony bin. He bent down and said, oh, my love, my darling. It's fantastic. So that was Paul.
I mean, it's a crazy idea, but it sounded as though it got better wonderful. And better. But you were and you were doing other stories.
Yes, we were doing other stories. Yeah.
The famous Archbishop
Cardinal Seymour.
He also sang.
He did.
Yeah. So after you did an interview with him
and all that sort of stuff, so we went and did an interview with Cardinal Sin, and Paul Lockyer said to him, well, Cardinal, he said, and Paul was a devout Catholic, he said, I bet you've got a good singing voice. And the Cardinal said, well, so he said, well, come out on Sunday with me to my area where it's my holy church, and I go out every Sunday and say Mass. He said, we'll get a little group together and we'll see what we can do. Cardinal Sin sang, oh, my love, my darlings. There it was. We had Cardinal Sin.
And the children sang too.
And children sang as well. Just amazing. Okay.
And
we had one beautiful little boy, about 14. He sang the whole thing through. Absolutely fantastic. And we ended the story on his version. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Good light side.
Speaking of boys in Catholic situations.
Oh. Well, let's not go there.
A little about your childhood. Can I, just in terms of your episode, going to the seminary, is that all right?
I became a seminarian, seminarian, yeah. And
you actually had a mate who talked you into it, is that right?
Vincenzo de Bella, my best friend, yeah. So Vincey and I, the local priest, said, look, you two boys should come out to the seminary and see if you like seminarian life, and perhaps, if you want to join the order. So Vincey and I, my mate down the road, said, we've got to go out there, it'll be fabulous, it'll be a free day out. And we went along to the seminary, and it was fantastic. And there was cattle and snooker and everything but seminarian life they showed us. And of course, when we got back to Sydney, the priest said, well, boys, what do you think? And I said, well, it's all right. But Vincey said, no, we've got to join. This is wonderful. We get free poop, snooker, we get food, we get anything but religious life. Anyway, so we signed up, and the priest came to collect me from my mother's house, and she was in tears, and the rest of the family were glad to get rid of us because it was a very small house, and had an extra bed. So when the priest came, I said, and where's Vincenzo de Bella? And he said, oh no, Vincenzo's not coming. He decided to pull out. So here I was heading off to the seminary alone.
The night before.
Yeah, he pulled out the night before. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Vince.
In your life, as a cameraman in the UK, over the many years there, you met a lot of big stars. Some of them had wonderful experiences with them, and in various different circumstances. Can you tell me about Billy?
Oh, Billy. Well, Billy, this young lad, came to the ABC's Portland office saying he wanted to get into the technical side of making films, and could he help out and be part of the team? And I said, well, I occasionally need a sound recordist, so you could help me out with that. So he would come along 3 or 4 days a week, and some days he'd just disappear, another time he would come. So eventually Billy said he was very interested in music. And he knew a lot of the major stars in the pop world. And if we ever wanted to film any of them, he could organise it. We said, really? Okay. And we said, well, how about the Sex Pistols? And he said, sure, no problem. So we went and filmed the Sex Pistols and Johnny Rotten, and we got interviews with them, and it was amazing. Johnny Rotten was amazing because he kept on spitting. But apart from that, he got us into big stars that would be extremely difficult to get. Anyway, so Billy said one day, look, I'm thinking of leaving. I've got other interests, but it's been fabulous, and thank you very much. And I said, Billy, good luck. You've been terrific, and thanks for helping. And I was watching, about 2 months later, Top of the Pops, and there was Billy in Top of the Pops. He changed his last name to Idol. He became Billy Idol. A big star now, amazing. So I couldn't believe it. That's Billy. So that's how I got into Billy Idol.
Something that Australians and British people, maybe Americans too, would have envied was your encounter with John Cleese.
Oh, John Cleese, yes. A very good friend of mine, Paul Murphy, had rang up Cleese to see if he could do an interview with us. I forgot what the subject was. And Cleese was a bit offhand and said, oh, look, we might be able to organise something. Come down and we'll see what we can do. And he said, but I don't normally charge monetary fee. He said, but I need a bottle of, a case of Veuve Clicquot as the fee.
A case of champagne.
Champagne. Oh, sorry. I thought everyone knew Veuve. No? Okay. Veuve Clicquot was champagne.
The best you can get.
Yeah, the best you get. So he would do the interview for one case, 12 bottles of Veuve. So
but it was early in the day, though.
Oh, it was 9 o'clock. It was 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. And we thought, well, this will be interesting. Anyway, so we did the interview, we knocked at the front door of his Notting Hill gatehouse, and he came to the door in his housekeeper came, and then John Cleese eventually came in his brown, long pyjama, what do they call them, dressing gown. And he said, yes, come in, yes, sit up there, yes. And so we did, and carrying the case of Veuve. And he said, well, put a couple in the fridge. So we did, and we did the interview, and I was packing up the gear, and he said, well, now we've got to have a drink. Now it's 9:30 in the morning, and John Cleese was popping the bottles of Veuve. So after about 3 bottles, I staggered down the front steps with my equipment, Thanks, Mr. Cleese. That's terrific. So that was my encounter with John Cleese, but quite a character. Quite a character.
And what was he like?
He was amazing. He was what you see on television. He's as tall as what you see, but a great sense of humour, and I'm sure he thought Aussies will knock the case over, no problem. Paul Murphy nearly did, but I think after my third glass, I was ready to go back to the office.
So you had, what, a couple of hours with him?
Oh, I think we were there till about midday.
Okay.
Because the Verve was going one out of the fridge and one into the fridge.
And presumably he was between films at that stage or something, was he?
I'm not sure what he was doing, and I'm not sure what we interviewed him about, but
Okay.
he was certainly, at the end of the champagne, I wasn't sure if we'd actually filmed him.
All right. Shall we say, we've got another
Yes.
clip.
What's the next one? It's
This is about...
Timor, East Timor, the invasion of East Timor. So I might set this up a little bit before we roll it. We were going to go in with the Australian forces to liberate East Timor from the Indonesian, the Jakarta-based military, and we set off. We had to go to Jakarta to get a chartered aircraft to fly to Dili, and which we did. The plane was full of international journalists.
1999?
1999, I'm sure a lot from this area. So the plane was full, and off we headed. As we got closer to Dili, we could see a lot of the city in flames, but our plane couldn't contact the control tower. So there was no contact at all. But the only contact we were able to contact was the military aircraft from Australia that were going in with Hercules, with their forces. So we were told to get on the back of that. In fact, we ended up a lot closer than the back. We probably ended up about the third aircraft. So as we landed in Dili, the army, our Australian troops, were running out of the back of these Hercules, and I ran down the back of the stairs, and we could see that there were a lot of bodies around. We could see that the control tower, they had stripped the occupants of the control tower and had them tied up and in chicken pens around the control tower, so we knew what we were in for. The next problem was to try and get into Dili and to see our forces, the Australians and UN force, part of the UN team, liberate Dili, East Timor, from the Indonesians. And of course, there was no transport. We did eventually get a car, but one of the journalists had got a bicycle, a Dutch journalist, and then within 1 hour of arriving, we saw his body laying in a ditch. He'd been shot through the head. So there were lots of militia around who were really Indonesian soldiers in civilian uniforms. Anyway, take a look at the story.
In the terror that's now sweeping East Timor, Australia's own hands are not clean. We have trained the Indonesian army in the killing skills they're now using against civilians. Our cover story is reported by Sunday's Ross Coulthard.
When they came, silently walking through the streets of Dili, it took your breath away. It was a simple act of defence, a plea for peace, a last gasp of goodness, it seemed, before East Timor sinks into the abyss. Indonesia says it is arming these paramilitary killers because of attacks from Falentil pro-independence guerrillas. But Australia's man in Jakarta says the violence they have unleashed in response is unjustified.
You've got to acknowledge that there has been considerable Falentil violence over the years, and indeed more recently. There has been Falentil violence this year, but equally it's not, the evidence does not indicate that the pro-integration militias have been only responding to such violence. They have on many occasions taken the initiative.
When East Timor's governor Abilio Osario Suarez recorded this tape of love songs 2 years ago. It was played interminably on local radio. But no one dared complain about this indulgence by East Timor's most powerful local son. Here, Suarez is God, ruling East Timor from his mansion on the waterfront with the assurance of Indonesia's military muscle. In his mansion, the heroes depicted on the wall are the pro-integration fighters who invaded with Indonesia in 1975. Governor Suarez has done very well out of his friendship with Indonesia, particularly the Suharto family. There isn't much in this town, ditches and roads, that his Anak Liambao construction group hasn't built. Most of the cement, of course, is provided by retired General Tri Sutrisno, Suharto's former vice president. When the Australian Favaro family fled their Dili hotel after the 1975 invasion, Suarez took it over. The bottled water East Timorese drink comes from this factory, Aquamore, run by Governor Suarez's brother-in-law. It's linked to Siti Hediati, the Suharto middle daughter married to the notorious General Prabowo. And the governor's family even shares the fruits of a lucrative little tax on all the alcohol East Timorese drink. Suharto's grandson was given an alcohol sticker monopoly that's also run by the governor's brother-in-law. You've got rich from your association with Indonesia. Isn't that the reason why you're so determined to stay part of Indonesia? You've got so much to lose.
Well, that might be what you think, but that's not the reality at all. I'm not rich. Maybe I've got relatives who owe a lot of money to the bank. Now, people may see that as being rich, but really that's up to them, and I won't deny it. But, and the facts prove it, everyone in East Timor has the same opportunities.
But few people in East Timor do have the same opportunity. Most are wretchedly poor. In reality, nearly a quarter of a century of civil war and corruption has seen most investment grind to a halt. East Timor is a basket case economy. There are no jobs available. Malnourished and dirty children are everywhere. It's from the desperate population in grubby slums like these that shadowy Indonesian military intelligence officers have recruited the paramilitary thugs, now bludgeoning and killing any visible pro-independence voice. The odd bit of graffiti says what many really think, but Dili is a very frightened and a very scary town.
So, I mean, after I'd filmed that story, the United Nations got in touch with me and asked me would I go around Dili filming the atrocities, and there were lots to film, people down wells and various other things that had happened. So I documented most of the atrocities that the Indonesian forces had done to Catholic priests, nuns, and the civilian population. Wasn't very good, wasn't very pleasant.
One of the things people say in your book is that you pretty well said yes to almost every occasion when there was fighting or war or danger. Why? Well, what's your outlook?
Well, I wasn't somebody that sought out wars or wanted to do just wars. It just happened that in the area that I was working, and I was the only cameraman in London at the time, so there was Rhodesia, which went on for an awful long time, is where I met Derek Williams, not Derek Williams, the cameraman Neil Davis, sorry, my apologies. I met Neil Davis there. We went into Angola.
Derek Williams is another cameraman
another
just
cameraman.
Across the aisle.
I was looking at
a very good one too.
A very good one. A New Zealander, so a cousin. But so we covered Rhodesia, Angola, and hotspots like that, the Middle East War, Yom Kippur War, and it wasn't something I hunted out. It was something that was there. It needed covering. There was only one person that was going to do it. If it was going to be covered from London, it was me.
Okay. And some of those experiences were pretty tough.
Yeah.
Are you a believer? Did your early life in the seminary? You must have had occasions to pray to get me out of here.
Many occasions. So the Yom Kippur War was the first war I really covered, in the war between Israel and Syria and the Egyptians. And it was a tank war, basically, up on the Golan Heights, and that was the very first time I'd ever been to war. And unfortunately, I was captured and treated as a Israeli spy. So I was taken to a Syrian prison and not treated very nicely until a Red Cross, thank God, the Red Cross got me out of there. So I was there for about a week. So that was the start of my war adventures, if you like. And after that, I thought, I don't need war anymore. But if I didn't go back and do Rhodesia and those other things, Angola and that, I probably wouldn't have been able to face those sort of things ever again. So it would have interfered with my career.
I got the feeling reading this, just largely in chronological order, that, well, one, it's surprising after that incident that you kept saying yes, although I suspect you do have a deep, strong faith, and that is very good.
Not in the Catholic Church anymore, by the way. Not after what's been the revelations of child sex abuse, which I was abused as a young boy, and that's why I went into the seminary, to get away from a particular priest.
Okay.
And I gave evidence at the Royal Commission to child sex abuse of my case.
Yes, indeed. But you turned your back on the seminary.
I did.
And a good man still, went off to do your thing, and then you got to meet the Pope.
Yes, well, I did get to meet the Pope.
I hope you didn't blame him for that early...
I didn't bring it up with him. I thought it wasn't the place to bring it up with him. Though we were doing a story in South America on liberation theology, and we went to Rome to see if we could get just images of the Pope and priests milling around the Vatican. But while we were there, we got to hear that all the bishops from Australia were in Rome meeting John Paul II. And I knew the press secretary from all the popes that had died. I'd covered those things at the Vatican. So I went in and asked an American woman, a fantastic woman, could we possibly get some shots of the Australian popes from around Australia meeting John Paul II? And she said, look, if you're here tomorrow morning at about 11 o'clock, she said, they'll be coming out of his office, and maybe we can ask the Pope and the bishops if they just stand there for a quick photo op. And I said, fantastic, that's all we need. We arrived, and as we turned up, she said, oh my God, she said, I've got the times wrong. They've already done their meeting and they're about to leave. If we hurry, we can probably go through the catacombs underneath the Vatican and up to the Pope's office. I couldn't believe it. I mean, here we were rushing through the catacombs underneath the Vatican. And they were amazing themselves, but I didn't have time to swing them and film. But and so finally we arrived at the door of the Pope, and there was another still photographer there, and they said, right, come in, there'll be a little bench, stand at the bench, you'll see the Pope, and the bishops will stand there for you, because we'd mucked it up. So I went in there, and there was John Paul II and all the Australian bishops. I was in the holiest of being an ex-seminarian. So I'd got the photo op, and the bishops were filed out, and John Paul II came around, and he put his hand out. I kissed his ring, and I said, Your Holiness. He said, you're from Australia? He said, I love Australia. And then I asked him, would it be possible if I could get my journalist in to just shake his hand? And he said, of course, bring him in, of course. Good. So he was a wonderful man. So, and after that, he sent a scroll of a papal blessing to me and my family, which, for me, was a big deal.
Very good.
Not these days. Go on.
A nice fellow.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah.
Okay. Who has? Was that the VIP that meant the most to you, or what others? We've got a couple of other clips that are going to come up. They're short too. These are of big names in Australia. We should give you a briefing on who they are.
Yeah.
One of them is Australia's most. Would you call him our biggest artist?
Oh, yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
100%.
A man whose paintings sell in the many millions. Another one is possibly our country's greatest operatic performer, definitely our greatest operatic performer, but our greatest artist, full stop,
Yes.
Joan Sutherland. But you're going to tell us a little about. Are we starting with?
We start with Sidney Nolan.
Okay.
Sir Sidney Nolan. So he became a Sir afterwards. We went to Africa to do a story, a 1-hour documentary on Sid Nolan, who was famous for his Ned Kelly series through Australia, the paintings of that famous Ned Kelly helmet. If you don't know it.
For those of you who don't know, Ned Kelly was a bushranger
okay, yeah,
who made himself a metal helmet with a slit
Yep.
to see out at the top, and the most notorious bushranger in Australian history in about the 1880s, was it, or
1880s?
wanted by the police, hunted down.
Him and his family, they were
Yeah.
hunted down, the gang, the
Kelly
Kelly
gang.
gang.
In Victoria, in
Yeah,
southern.
so it was quite notorious for that. So Nolan decided to paint a series of Ned Kelly, thinking, I suppose, every Australian knows Ned Kelly, and he did a series of paintings of them.
And these images became classic,
Classic.
all around the world.
Yeah, I think Queen Elizabeth II bought a couple of them, so
Right.
they were at Windsor. But anyway, let's see the film. So but I must tell you that Sid Nolan and I got on extremely well, and it was Sid Nolan that taught me a lot about light and shade and compositions in photos. So I put a lot down to Sid Nolan in terms of my, as you progress through your art, having someone like Sid Nolan sort of talk to you about light and shade and colour and composition in painting terms. I then used it in my photography, and I went on to use it quite a lot.
And he got on well with you because
I got on very well with him.
This little image that you see at some of the end of the chapters was you got him doing.
Well, I said to Sid, we were by a little lake, and there was elephants, and there were giraffes and hippos and birds, and I said, now Sid, I'm going to put the camera in front of you, and I just want you drawing. Oh, the other thing was, he only took a still camera along, a digital camera. He did all these paintings back in London. Oh, sorry. And I said, well, that's not going to work for film, so how can we do it? Can you get a pencil? And he said, well, what I'd like to try is crayon. He said, I've never done crayon on paper. He said, let's try that. So he was fantastic. He just, he knew that the camera wasn't going to work. Television, films needs to see the instant image, not when you get back to London. So he did that. So I said to him, look, see, if you just sit there and I'll film you from the front and then I'll come over your shoulder and see what you're drawing. And he said, all right, off you go. So he's sitting there and he's got his pad and he's doing all this, you see. And I then got the camera and went around and shot over his shoulder. And it was a strange image. It was like a man in a dress holding a tripod. And I said, what is it? And he said, it's you in front of me. You said, paint me whatever's in front of you. Paint it. And that's what he did. And I've used that all through the image, so all through the book.
Okay, can we go that one, Julian? Thank you.
He liked a good bottle of red, Sid.
Point of view making mythology out of them, as I perhaps tried to do in Australia with Ned Kelly. But I quickly found I couldn't do this. I wasn't familiar with the people. I became fascinated instead with the animals. So I've looked a lot at animals, and I had an exhibition and tried to paint them. But I feel I'm a beginner at it, and I've come to Africa many times since on the way to Australia. About the animals is the fact that they move so beautifully. They all have a specific kind of gait, but for a painter it's extremely difficult to capture this feeling, because half the animal is the fact it's in motion, whereas a painter is obviously got to deal with a static image. But there is a technical way of doing all this, but it's kind of trial and error. And I'm going to try and do my mythology part of Africa, not to do with people, but to do with these elephants. It's a timeless spectacle. You're going to see a lion eating a carcass, or eating the body of the thing, and there'll be a carcass left. And you're back again then where you were in Australia with seeing carcasses.
A truly an amazing man. On that trip, we went to Treetops with a guy by the name of Jack Block, and Block owned all the Block hotels throughout the big game reserves, including Treetops. And it was Jack Block that went up to the treetops to tell the Queen that her father had just died. So the famous saying that she went up as a princess and came down a queen. So that was Sydney's best friend, Jack.
Okay. What year was that?
It
It looks a long time ago. That camera he was using was about that big.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Well, I was still in London, so it would have been, I don't know,
60s.
early 70s.
Okay.
Early 70s, yeah.
Okay.
But you can see, I went to some amazing and saw amazing scenes, elephants and...
How long were you down there for that?
A month.
Okay.
A month. We went through all to get the right animals. You've got to move around Kenya quite a fair bit.
You went through all the bottles of red?
He loves Stellenbosch wines, red wines, South African, good red, so did I. So we became very good friends.
All right. The next one is going to be. Is that right?
Joan Sutherland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll do. Joan Sutherland is a very famous Australian opera singer, probably one of our Dame Melba, yeah, and Joan Sutherland. I think they're right up there with in world opera. And Sidney Nolan, we'd done Sidney Nolan first, and Nolan knew Dame Joan well, and he said to her, "Look, if you're ever going to get a doco made, if you ever want to do that, these are the two boys, producer and myself. They're great company." He was only thinking about the red wine, I'm sure. Anyway, so we got invited down to Switzerland, to Montreux, where her home was, Joan Sutherland's home was, and we got invited to a dinner party she was holding, just to see if she would get along with us and if she would agree to making a 1-hour documentary of her travelling through all of Europe, the opera houses of Europe, and we were going to tag along. And so we were invited up. We went to the house for the dinner party. There were about 10 people, 12 people there. We sat down, had a few drinks, sat down, and there were the famous opera tenors and arias, and the people sitting around, arias, a song, of people who were the elite of European opera. And I was sitting at this end of the table with Joan Sutherland there, and directly opposite to me was the director of the Sydney Opera House. So these were big shots in opera, and they were talking about opera, and it was going on, and you know, I love this Milan Opera House, and oh yeah, but the Paris Opera House is good, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, okay. And so Joan leant across and put a hand on mine and said, "Now, Les, tell us." The whole table stopped and listened. "Tell us, what's your favourite opera?" I had never been to an opera, and if I was going to impress this woman, this was no way to start. But I paused. The whole table just looked at me and said, come on, get out. And I said, "Well, I've got to be honest, I've never been to an opera. I've never been to an opera house. I've never been anywhere. I know nothing about opera or classical music." And I thought that'd be it. We'd be shot out the door. That'd be the end of the documentary. But no, she was such a wonderful woman. She said, "How fantastic, we can mould you." So, and she did. So for 6 months I travelled with her, and I used to go down to Montreux a couple of times a month and live at the house with her and pick up all the overlay footage, which you'll see now. So very lucky again. So she taught me opera and classical music, and now I adore it.
Julian.
In the hallway is a portrait of the young Melba, discovered by Richard Bonning in London. While Norma is still in rehearsal, there's work to do on future productions.
Are you finished there? Can we do something about some of our work?
Yes, right, okay. Well, we'd better get on with you know what.
Well, the Seraglio's as good as anything, I think, because I don't know much about it, you know. I mean, I haven't had to sing any much of it.
After 20 years, or what is it, 15 years?
Well, I mean, the Martin Algarten's the only thing I ever knew. Should we refresh that first?
Yes, all right. Okay.
It's not cut at all.
Oh, no cuts. Give us too much of the...
Oh, yes.
I mean, you have to sing this as if it's bel canto music, German or not. Mm-hmm. And all the best German singers don't cough and spit all the time, so don't...
All right.
But you remember, you're the trumpet. You must sing it completely...
I don't feel very like a trumpet.
Never mind, you will.
I'm now trying to take the hooks out, and I'm making putting ours in.
Just once more there.
Jemals sein.
Yes.
We've got one to go, and there's some photos, and then people can ask some questions if you like. So you've had that period of travelling all over England, Europe, Middle East, Africa, covering stories just literally sometimes just one straight after the other.
Oh yeah, and we'd be away 4 or 5 months at a time sometimes.
And some of that was even strife up in Belfast.
Oh, a lot of Belfast, yeah.
And
awful lot of Belfast.
There was a section in your book about Mountbatten.
Oh, Louis Mountbatten, yes. Well, I wasn't there when he was killed, but
Yes.
I did interview Louis Mountbatten, filmed him
Yes.
being interviewed, and he was terrific. It was just great fun, and at the Savoy Hotel. And I've forgotten what the interview was about so long ago now, but Mountbatten had said to us afterwards, look, when you finish with the interview, pack up your gear, leave it there, and we'll go and have a beer. I know you Aussies love a beer. So we said, oh, that'd be fantastic. So we packed up the gear, we went across to the bar in the Savoy, and the guy running the Savoy, the head guy, said, well, a very, very Spanish guy said, I'm very, very sorry, cannot come in because not have jacket, cannot come in. This is
probably the guy Cleese used in Fawlty Towers.
Probably, yes. Yeah, probably the same guy. But anyway, he refused to let us in without jackets, and Louis Mountbatten said, look, it's quite all right, they're with me, and I'll take care of them, don't worry. No, you cannot come in. I'm sorry, cannot come in, no jacket. And Mountbatten said, you know, cousin to the Queen, said, go and get me your manager. Immediately, go and get me. He said, no, you cannot come. Anyway, eventually he went off, and this very public school manager came, and he said, what seems to be the problem? And he took one look at Louis Mountbatten and said, you're refusing Louis Mountbatten, member of the royal family, into our bar? Yeah, he cannot come because they not have jacket. And he said, the drinks are on the house. We're very, very sorry, you know. And he said, go, just go. So poor old Manuel left, and we had the run of the bar.
Okay. You got back to Australia in the second half of your life. I was intrigued to see you bought a house in my part of the world, Crow's Nest. Just near
Crow's Nest, yes.
North Sydney.
I still have it there, yes.
Where
are you, North Sydney?
Well, I was down in Wollstonecraft, and
okay.
then we got over very close to Crow's Nest, where you got a home. When you were there, you jumped around a bit. You did a bit with the ABC.
Yes.
10, Channel 10.
Yes, Channel 10.
Which was what, the page one?
The page one stuff that we've seen here, Timor and Eritrea.
Okay. And then back with your friend Ray Martin at Channel 9.
Yes.
And that required a jump from hard news to...
Variety. I mean, it was a daily, Monday to Friday, hour and a half variety show. Big band, Ray was hosting.
Yeah.
And
fun.
And
a bit more fun.
A lot of fun. A lot of stars, a lot of travel. Now Asia, you know, Asia came into focus for me. I didn't really know Asia then. I got to know it well with Cardinal singing and Shining Melody and all the rest of it, and then working with my old mate Paul Lockyer.
Okay.
So.
And while you were there, you also got to know Fred Hollows.
I got to know Fred. Went to Eritrea with Fred when he was alive. For those that don't know the Fred Hollows Foundation, Fred Hollows was an ophthalmologist who was such a wonderful man, decided that cataract blindness in the world was too much and that he wanted to do something about it. So would travel mostly in Africa and, of course, Australia, middle of Australia. And he decided that he would set up a foundation, and which I became part of in the end. But our first eye factory, making lenses, was in Eritrea. Right. So I'm about to go back there again this year with Ray Martin.
Okay, just a bit of history. Yeah, Fred Hollows has died, but I think he actually became famous out of a 60 Minutes report by Ray Martin. He was consistently voted the most admired Australian for his humanitarian work with the Aborigines. He operated on thousands, maybe tens of thousands of Aborigines plagued by eye problems. That's part of Fred Hollows. This is the work that he's done now has benefited millions, but it went to Eritrea, Nepal, Vietnam, and it's gone even further.
Oh, now Vietnam, Philippines, Laos, Myanmar, we're all over Asia, and I work for them now on a full-time basis. I do a lot of their mostly training films, but online stuff as well. I film the operations of cataracts being removed, especially difficult ones for training young doctors, young ophthalmologists. And Fred's big dream was to solve glaucoma, which still exists today, which is a terrible disease. And we haven't eradicated that, but certainly in terms of, I work a lot in northern China and Mongolia now. We're never going to get to the end of it, but we're very close to helping quite a lot of people. One of the stories we're going to see now is a film I did in Laos on two little twin boys. This is it, two little twin boys, 8 months old. Now, they were the youngest ever to be operated. They both had bilateral cataracts. And they were the youngest ever to have this operation done.
Incidentally, that was cement that was meant to be used on a runway, is that right?
Yes, that's right. It's true, yeah.
Got to love the Lao.
I'm not sure about that building.
Okay, that's Vientiane.
These days, you'll find the Fred Hollows Foundation fixing eyes in most parts of the world. It's an astonishing record. But what they're about to do here has never been tried before in this country. So this is Vientiane, Laos. It's the capital of a mountainous former French colony, forgotten for decades except for the more adventurous tourists. And this is where our journey of rescue begins, a life-saving journey far from here, up country, to rescue two baby boys who are cataract blind.
Ray, this is a matter of life and death. We know from our experience that people who go blind in a place like this, especially children, have a really, really short life expectancy.
Andy Nilsson has worked for the Fred Hollows Foundation for 7 years. He's organised this high-risk operation to try and restore the sight of 7-month-old identical twins Samlan and Sin Tan. The boys were born blind with congenital cataracts.
It's clear the cataracts are already causing issues for the baby, so they need to come out as quickly as possible. If we don't get to them soon, it's likely that there's going to be permanent damage.
Yeah, I'm just so thrilled that I'm still involved, that I'm able to come out and do a story here in Laos with these two young twins.
Photographer Michael Amendolia took that iconic shot of Professor Fred 22 years ago, just a few months before the legendary eye doctor died of cancer. Michael's travelled the world recording the Foundation's work, but nothing quite as delicate as this.
I don't know what to expect. We're going into a deepest, darkest jungle of Laos. I've never photographed two 7-month-old babies having a cataract operation.
It's a 2-day journey into maybe the most remote country I've ever seen, starting with an hour's flight north, then a 10-hour zigzag across the misty mountains, avoiding convoys of Chinese trucks that stagger up the hills and fall over coming down the other side. It's a hazardous drive, let me tell you, and a relief to finally climb aboard a long, thin wooden boat for the last frantic leg of our journey. We really are up the creek here. This is the muddy Nam Ta River. It's in the north of Laos, up near the China border. It really is heart of darkness country. We're in the boat for about 2 hours, a speeding longboat, up to the ethnic village of Art Nam. That's where the two baby boys are waiting to be collected.
We work on Fred's philosophy, which is that no one in the world today should be blind. simply because they're born into this kind of paradise, a remote paradise.
Way up beyond any roads or airstrips or electricity, across a series of rapids, we arrive at our destination near the China border. It's a place of thatched huts, small dogs and toe-eating ducks, along with the talisman of life, the TV satellite dish. And meeting the babies, you can clearly see the grey cataracts that blind them.
People giving us money allows us to reach babies like this and change a life forever. You know, $25 can restore sight. That was Fred's message over 20 years ago, and it's our message today.
The village thanks us with a feast of sticky rice, bamboo shoots and chicken pieces, while everyone watches on curiously from outside.
In this job, you do go to some pretty interesting places off the beaten track, because that's where the blindness is. It's out in these places that are hours and hours for us to get to. It's a huge journey for them and a huge financial expense, and that's where an organisation like ours steps in.
Back down the long brown river and through the rapids, then it's 3 hours on a roller coaster 4-wheel drive. If Samlan and Sintan are having trouble figuring what's going on, wait until they find out what their eye surgeon, Dr. Petterman, has in store for them.
So this is the big moment for our 2 little boys. This is why they made the long journey. And for Dr. Petterman and his team, it's a delicate 2-hour operation. As skillful as they are, Dr. Petterman says that he's never done anything quite like this before. And even for an eye surgeon, that has to be just a bit scary.
Now, over the years, I've seen dozens of these cataract operations. I've never seen a theatre so quiet, with everyone so focused on the surgeon. They know that this is groundbreaking stuff for Les.
Some of these photographs are actually quite confronting in some ways, so I've got to find the moments where there's just this little bit of tenderness, and I'm just looking for that, and if it happens, I'm there to grab it.
The first twin, Sintan, is finished and off to post-op recovery. Now it's Samlan's turn on the table, and he's clearly in safe hands. An hour later, the patches go on his eyes too.
It requires very specialist training, which the Fred Hollows Foundation provides. There's only a few surgeons in Laos who can actually do this operation. This is, Fred would say, this is stuff you dream about, and it's stuff you shouldn't get paid for.
The next morning, it's tears as the sticking plaster comes off, but unbridled joy when Dr. Petterman finds that both babies can now see the toy police cars. A simple operation down the track, he predicts, will restore their sight perfectly, and Mum can't stop smiling.
The morning after the operation, Doctor,
the first time for me to do the twin cataract surgery of my life, you know. The first time.
No complications?
Good outcome.
Good outcome.
No complicated.
No complications. Well, congratulations to you.
Yeah, very happy. Thank you very much.
There's one picture where Doctor is trying to catch one of the twins' eye with his torch. Mum's just in the background. She can see that his eyes are moving a little as a good response to having the cataracts out. And there's a nice little shape with the Doctor in the foreground. I think that's my favourite shot.
It's been the absolute privilege of my life to see when the eye patch comes off and people can see. And sometimes it's an old grandmother who hasn't seen her husband for 5 years, but sometimes it's children who haven't seen at all.
You try to do the best, I know.
But when we see you smile, it makes it worthwhile. What you do is a miracle.
Thank you. Very rewarding stuff to see that. I mean, I've been back to that village now about 3 times, and they're now going to school and can see beautifully.
Vandalising furniture. I'm being sarcastic. Well, they can find it now anyway.
Yeah, they can find it.
Yeah, that's right. All right.
So there's pamphlets at the back if anyone wants to know more about the foundation. Please take one and have a look.
Can we put the, Julian, can we just put the photos, just the, the stock ones that we're showing earlier? I was just going to point, okay, is that going to flick on to others? Sorry. Folks, there's a microphone there if you'd like to ask a question or seek to embarrass Les in some way.
Thank you.
While we're... here we go. Okay. One of those photographs earlier was of the big stars that you've met. There was one of...
Charlton Heston. And
yes, and there was another one of Mission Impossible star Cruise.
Tom Cruise, yeah.
Where did you encounter him?
Tom Cruise was shooting in Australia, Mission Impossible 2, I think it was.
Right.
He was fantastic. So we went to do an interview with him, and he wouldn't let us go. He just said, let's have some beers, forget the film. And so we sat there most of the afternoon drinking beer with Tom Cruise. He just was... I don't think he wanted to go back on the set. So he was just terrific,
wow.
Which is unusual.
Yeah. Was he going out with Nicole Kidman at that time?
I think he was. Yeah. I think he was. But Charlton Heston, on the other hand, not a very nice character.
Okay.
Not a very nice character.
When you did Charlton Heston,
yeah,
that was in LA?
It was in LA, and it was during the Clinton campaign, and of course Heston was very anti-Clinton because he was the president of the National Gun and Rifle Association, so we interviewed the opposition.
As well as a movie star, he was a gun enthusiast.
He was the president of the NRA.
Right. So you had your interview with Charlton Heston.
Yeah.
Then you went to interview someone else.
Oh, then we went to interview
Rod Steiger.
Rod Steiger. That was a very, very funny encounter because we literally went from Heston's house to Steiger's house, which are in the same valley. And we arrived at the door, and there was a Mexican woman there who was his housekeeper, and she had no idea we were coming, but she let us in, oddly enough, and said, "Oh, Mr. Steiger, he's in the tub at the back. He's in the tub." We thought, he's in the tub? So we wandered through the house. I mean, it's amazing, really. And there was Rod Steiger across the swimming pool in a jacuzzi, just sitting there with his bald head. And so we went up, and he said, "Oh, yeah, God damn it, I forgot you guys were coming." Sure. He said, "Look, I'll get out of the tub, and we can do the interview just over there. But you're going to have to, I've just had both hips replaced. You're going to have to, hip operations." He said, "You're going to have to help me out of the tub." So here's me helping Rod Steiger out, one of my heroes, completely naked, of the tub, and his backside and everything's going on. And I think, my God, I don't believe this job. So he was great as well.
So you went from one Heston, who was tense.
He was very anti us doing it, because I think he knew what our angle was.
Yep. Okay. He thought he was going to get hit with anti-gun stuff.
Yeah.
And
he did.
And then you get to Steiger, who had words to say about banning guns. Is that right?
Yeah, well, he was very much on the Clinton side of politics, and he was very anti-guns.
Okay.
Which he told us,
Okay, but it was just interesting. You went into his house. The woman says, "Yeah, he's out the back." You get out there, and he's naked.
Amazing. I mean, she didn't even know who we were.
And then what happened then? After you interviewed him on camera.
Yep.
What happened then?
I'm not sure what happened then.
Oh, well, your book says you got drunk together.
Oh, we had another great drinker.
That's how most of them end, isn't it?
That's right. You can see why I've lost my hair and a bit of an alcoholic.
I'm sorry. But it also happened down in the south of Italy. Gore Vidal, is it?
Gore Vidal, he was an interesting character, yeah. Gore Vidal, the great American writer. We went to his house to talk to him about various things, and he invited us in, and we did the filming, and at the end of the filming he said, he had a little vineyard, and he said, "I want you to sample some of my wine." And we said, "Love to." And so he said, "Come in the next room." So he was holding court. Now, Gore Vidal was very much on the gay side of life and had his partner there. So I was with a reporter who was female, and he put her right at the back of the room, and the sound recorders and myself, "Come and sit here, boys, come and sit here." So he was holding court with these, especially my young sound recorders. I think he had a bit of an eye for him. But anyway, look, I don't know. But he was coming off to Thailand, and he said, the last thing he said to us was, "I'm off to Thailand." He said, "There you've got to use a very big Macintosh," meaning, I suppose, condom.
Okay. That was on the Amalfi Coast.
That was on the Amalfi Coast,
and
yes.
he left, but was very hospitable too.
Oh, very hospitable. Said, "Look,
you hadn't eaten?
You haven't eaten all day. You've come from Rome. please go to my restaurant, I'll organise it. And he just had a feast laid out in front of us, which just went on. The chef said, when you're finished eating, just tell me and we'll stop. But it went on for hours. It was great. And more wine, of course.
And he shouted.
He paid for everything, yeah.
Yes,
yeah, he
yes.
wouldn't. He was off to Thailand, to Bangkok, but he shouted.
Okay. You were here when the tsunami happened.
Oh, yes. There's going to be nothing for them to buy. We told all the stories.
Okay, we got one or two to go, and if there's any more, just a little on the tsunami. We're talking December 2004.
2004. I was living in Pattaya. I had a house down in Pattaya, and I was about to fly back to Australia on the morning of the tsunami hit, and the whole of my house just shook. And you know when you're lying there and there's an earthquake, you think, was that real? And I got out, and of course it was still shaking. And on my drive back to get the flight to Australia, I rang my television station, Channel 9, saying, well, it was around Christmas time, it was December,
Boxing Day.
Boxing
yes.
Day. And Boxing Day.
26th.
And there was no one in the newsroom. There was, hardly anyone there. And I kept on trying to get messages that there'd been a huge, I didn't know it was a tsunami, huge earthquake, and it had shaken. Most of the windows in Bangkok from the highway I could see were broken. But anyway, I couldn't raise them, flew off back to Australia. When I arrived in Australia, because my phone was going berserk, stay there, stay there, stay there. It was too late, I'd arrived back in Sydney, so.
And they
said,
sent you back.
Go straight back.
Yeah.
What are you doing here? You're no good here. So I had to get all my gear and fly back to. And then I went through the whole, Phuket, Ceylon, Sri Lanka, the train. Kala, yes.
Banda Aceh, where
Banda
virtually
Aceh,
everyone was killed?
Banda Aceh, it was horrible, just horrible.
Right.
That was the worst I've seen of anything like that. There were just bodies everywhere. And of course, December was hot.
Okay. And then you went to the scene of it's the greatest train tragedy
the great train,
ever.
Yeah.
In,
well, that
in
was
the bottom of Sri Lanka.
Yes, bottom of Sri Lanka near Gore, and there was still the train. I suppose most of you could remember that scene of the train where the train was coming down the coast and the wave had hit it, knocked it over, and a lot of people were killed. But there were two little brothers that had survived that train. With their parents were on the train with them, but they were the only survivors. Anyway, so we decided we could talk to the children about what they seen, and we were going to look after them in terms of accommodation and feed them for a while at least, if they'd help us with the film, which they did. And the last scene I wanted them to do was, with the train in the background, was walk down the coast and just look out at the ocean, which would make the point of, train, the two little boys, the ocean. But for some reason, they wouldn't walk where I wanted them to walk, so I could see the train and end up in the spot. And we did this about 6, 7 times. They wouldn't do it. And eventually, I insisted, because it was the great shot, that they do it, and I'd get my shot. And eventually, they did it. We went back to the hotel we were staying, fed them, and I said, could you, through the interpreter, ask them, what was the problem? Why wouldn't they do as I asked them to do, walk along that part of the coast? I mean, they're only 11 and 12-year-old. And she asked them, and they described that they told the interpreter, through the interpreter, that I was asking them to walk where their parents were buried, on top of their parents. So it just shows you that it's not all for the shot. You should think about, but I didn't know, so that was horrible.
All right. Folks, if there aren't any further questions, there are more copies of My Best Shot up there, or come and have a chat to Les and he will sign the book. I'm sorry, we've got Liam.
Jim, just before we get to questions, Les, your good friend Brian has organised a small surprise for you. We've all seen Mr. Ray Martin in the Fred Hollows film, the last one that was played, and he sent you this message.
Hey, Ben, mate, come here. Put the camera down and don't roll your eyes. That's what you always do. It's about this bloody book of yours. I'm flogging it again for you. I feel guilty because it was my idea as your oldest mate and your poorest brother. to write a book for your daughters and for your grandkids, not for anybody else. Now suddenly this is ridiculous. You've gone public about the whole thing. Well, I know you. I've been to, where you were born in Leichhardt. You're a working class boy from Leichhardt. That cul-de-sac that you lived in. Yeah, I'm trying to spend some time with a grandchild and I've got to flog your bloody book. Now get real. I mean, here you are. The Australian ambassador is there. He's a busy man, Les. He doesn't have time, and journalists who are there tonight, and professional literary types who make their living by telling stories, and they've got to come out for your bloody book. So, look, I'll tell you what you've got to do. Just get it, the available copies, all those that the publisher hasn't lost. Yeah, you can have it, mate. Just chuck it away. Yeah, drop it. And any that you've given a mate, get them back, and a few, radio types who've, refused to do interviews with you. Put them in a shopping bag, and there it is. Yeah, you can have it. I don't want the bloody thing. Sorry, man. Nothing personal. That's just editorial. And anyway, look, put them all in a shopping bag and catch the train and get out of there. But, well, okay. If you want one beer and a few nibblies, they're free. Whoops, sorry, mate. You're walking again. And you can have them and then piss off and just go. All right, because if anyone wants to buy a book, make sure they pay you, because you can buy me a beer. That'll be the first time in 40 years. Yeah, sorry, mate. We'll get the book. See you later. Bye, then. Bye, Ray.
You can see why he set up Peanut One with the kosher food. You can see what sort of character he is. That's his grandson.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're going to wind it up now, folks. Thank you very much. If you could put your hands together for Les Seymour and his wonderful book.
Thank you. Thank you.